Hi folks, I'm Sam from Star Tag and Label, and I'm here today to explain flexo printing. We've heard flexo printing, we've heard flexography, flexographic printing, multiple names for one process. And I just wanted to clear up the misconceptions or just basically talk about the process, how it works, how the ink is applied to the paper, and why you might want to use flexo printing in your next printing job. I've got out on the table here some components, but the first one I want to talk about is the printing plate. And this is basically where flexo gets its name. Flexography or flexo printing uses a flexible plate. Flexo printing was created many decades ago to compete, if you will, or have a different option for traditional printing. Traditional printing being rotary letterpress, gravure printing, offset printing, and all those printing methods use a metal plate or metal to apply the ink to paper. Flexo is just the opposite. It uses a flexible printing plate. So we'll get back to that a little bit later and explain how that all works. But to start with here, I've got laid out on the table several components that basically go into the process. Here at Star Tag and Label, we use water-based inks. These inks are water washable, environmental friendly. They're washed up with regular water. They're hot air dry. Basically, every print station has a hot air dryer unit after each station. And, there can be up to 8 or 10 different colors in a job. So the ink has to be dry from one station to the next. So these are all dried with hot air dryers. Along with the option of a water-based ink, there are also ultraviolet inks that are used in flexo printing. Instead of a hot air or forced air dryer to dry those inks, they're actually cured with either LED or ultraviolet light. Again, a great option to use those types of inks. They're fast cure, and it's just one more option that you have in ink systems for flexo. What we have here is an example of an ink fountain. We would pour the ink into the fountain to the desired level. That takes us into a metering roll. This metering roll sits down in the fountain. It basically is a rubber roller that will sit down in the fountain, and it will transfer the ink from the fountain up to the analox roller. Now, the analox roller is the next roller in the line, and it's the lifeblood of the printing. This roller has microscopic cells. If you were to look at this roller with a microscope, you would see pockets or cells of ink. Depending on how much ink we want to be applied to the plate, we choose an analox roller accordingly. This roller, I think, has 1,100 lines per inch. That's lines of cells per inch, 1,000 to 100. And then there's different volumes that are involved in that as well. We could have an 1,100 line roller with a 1 volume or a 1.5 volume. So the combination of lines of cells and the depth of those cells all play a role in how much ink we put onto the plate. That's the next roller that's in line in the ink fountain. So again, an ink fountain holds the ink. The metering roll transfers the ink from the fountain to the analox roller. And then the analox roller holds that ink in those pockets. Those cells hold that ink. Now, one part that's important in this process is what we call a doctor blade. This is a spring steel blade that actually rides against the analox roller. It's basically shearing off or scraping off the excess ink. So once that ink then is scraped off of this analox roller, it's left with a perfect amount of ink in that cell to then be transferred to the plate. So that basically covers what is involved in the ink fountain on flexo printing. The next component that we have is the print cylinder. The label size that we're printing dictates the size of the label cylinder. We have an array of label cylinders here, printing cylinders here that we can use to facilitate the different lengths of labels and different repeat lengths of labels that we run. The plate is applied to the print cylinder, but it's applied to the print cylinder with a two-sided tape. Once this two-sided tape is wrapped around the cylinder, it has a cushioning property to it that helps absorb some of the energy and some of the press that comes from applying ink to the plate and then from the plate to the paper. So once the sticky back or two-sided tape is applied to the cylinder, then we're going to put our printing plate around the cylinder. It's held into place with the adhesive on the two-sided tape. Now, the plate's kind of unique in the fact that in the early days of flexo printing, the method or the material of choice was rubber. Rubber introduced a lot of issues. When rubber plates were used, there were a lot of swelling. The size of the type will change based on the temperature of the plate. It just wasn't a very stable material to make a printing plate out of. When the invention of photopolymer came along, that's when everything changed. Plates got more stable, images got crisper, print quality increased. And basically the way this plate is made is it starts out as a certain mil thickness. The photopolymer is a certain mil thickness. The image that we want to print is cured into that photopolymer. That photopolymer hardens where the image that we want to print is at. Now the rest of this plate, what we call the floor of the plate, basically is washed away. It's scrubbed away in the process. So once the floor is relieved and is lower now than the printing part of the plate, now that gives us space to apply our ink to. So again, from the doctor blade, the analog scroller to the doctor blade, to the print cylinder, to the plate, the ink is all transferred. And that transfer of ink is only going to be on the part that's raised. For then, it's transferred to the paper. When everything comes together and everything lines up correctly, you've got a printed image, much like what you see here. These are just a small sample of what we do, but this is all done that way, where ink starts out in its raw form in a gallon jug and then is processed through to the printing plate, from the printing plate to the paper. Okay, so here we have a fully assembled print station. You know, one of the things that makes flexo printing unique to gravure printing or to rotary letterpress or to offset printing is just the number of options that we have when it comes to printing stations. You know, 8 color, 10 color, 12 color is not out of the question. So, you know, when you have that many different options when it comes to colors and stations, it's limitless on how many colors you can match. You know, the color gamut really increases when we have that many color options. So, you know, 8 and 10 colors is no problem at all. So that's one of the things that makes flexo printing a little unique to the other types of printing. One of the reasons that folks might choose flexo printing over one of the traditional printing methods, whether it's offset printing or digital printing, is, you know, in its early days, flexo printing started out as a cheaper alternative to offset printing. They needed to come up with a way to make faster changeovers, quicker color changes, and to be quite honest, just less materials and less rollers involved in the printing process. Now, with the technology that has changed over the last several decades, flexo printing is second to none. The quality of flexo printing has really, really increased. It takes a pretty sharp eye with a loupe to be able to tell the difference in something that's been offset printed and flexo printed. So flexo really comes into play where you're looking for medium to long runs, multiple copies, a lot of times digital printing, which is a really good option and a really good method to use. It kind of fails, or it lags behind for the larger volume. Larger volume flexographic printing is the way to go. So, you know, depending on your label project, the size of your label project, you know, we can work with you to determine where your job fits the best. It may be digitally printed, it may be flexo printed. But I think that's the biggest thing with flexo is it really shines in the larger quantities and the larger volumes. And again, the print quality has really increased. The technology has just really brought it leaps and bounds that it really was just 20 years ago. If you would like to learn more about the processes that we use here at Star Tag and Label to print labels with, please reach out. Or if you just like a quote, talk to us about a job, a future project that you've got that you're working on. Again, we love to hear from you and we look forward to working with you.